You're welcome back, and our next topic is criminalizing LGBTQ+, constitutionalism versus religious morality. Is there any middle ground for protecting minority groups from discrimination? Now, certainly many of us this week have engaged in uncomfortable conversations about where we stand on LGBTQ+ issues. Also the issues of minority rights and the implications of the Private Members Bill, which is named the Promotion of Proper Human Sexual Rights and Ghanaian Family Values Bill. Well, Parliament, we are told, has received some 150 and more memoranda, which it will review and which is meant to support shaping of what will be the final bill before it continues the legal process. But before we delve deep into the issues, CNN has been reporting on how this has been running this week. What we'll run for you now is an abridged version of that report by Steve McKenzie of CNN.
Hey, it's David. How are you doing?
We're heading to a safe house in Accra.
We're probably about 30 minutes from your live location now.
Run by gay activists.
Okay.
Can we carry in the cameras, or we need to keep the cameras in boxes?
I think let's carry it in boxes.
Thank you for having me.
We're meeting Joe. We agreed to hide his identity because he's afraid of being attacked again.
Take me back to that moment when those men came and started harassing you.
I was shaking when they took me to that room, and then they set up their cameras, and I was screaming, I was crying. I wanted to kill myself. For real, when I saw this video, I was like, it would be better I kill myself because I have nowhere to go.
And your dad threw you out.
Yeah.
And what was that moment like?
I cried like never before.
Soon, the community fears they could be targeted by the state.
What is your message to someone who is LGBT in Ghana right now?
Well, we love them. We always say, we love them.
But you want to send them to prison?
No, we are asking them not to do it.
A draft law to be debated in weeks coerces LGBTQ Ghanaians to choose between jail time and so-called conversion therapy, seen by UN experts as torture. It prosecutes same-sex displays of affection, even punishes activists supporting the community. Activists call it a homophobe's dream.
Today in 2021, you believe that someone who supports openly the LGBT community should potentially go to prison for 10 years?
Of course.
Why is
because
that?
It's against our culture. It's against our norm. It's against our tradition. And we don't want things that are against our sensibility should be, given priority in our society.
Tragically, the LGBTQ community here says that tolerance was slowly improving in Ghana. When they opened a support center in January, it rallied conservative lawmakers who say that being gay is un-African, a Western import. Backed by powerful religious groups, the leadership of the million-strong Pentecostal church say LGBTQ organizations are a national security threat.
If the same Bible told people to love thy neighbor as thyself, why would you want to torture your own neighbor? Why would you want to torture your child?
This prominent gay activist has already gone underground.
And that report by CNN's Steve McKenzie, I didn't watch it initially. Someone alerted me to it. So let's welcome our guests this morning. Still with us is the Honorable Joseph Kpemka. We have the privilege to have Akoto Ampao, private legal practitioner, not often one you get. And also we have on Zoom Edem Senanu, who is with Advocates for Christ. But let me start first with...
I didn't qualify his introduction, not just any private legal practitioner.
Oh, please.
I have refrained.
Please.
Yes, he's a senior rights advocate. I know I've refrained from saying he's the president's lawyer because that is being used in an entangled debate. So that is why. Thank you.
He's one of our most respected seniors.
Of course, certainly. Mr. Ampao, how do you feel watching that CNN report? That's an abridged version, though.
I feel sad for Ghana. I think that this is not where we should be heading at this time of our development, and that it is a retrograde step we are taking. And I hope that through this discussion, the discussion that is going on in the country now, which I hope fully believe will become less one of insults and name-calling, we can address the main issues and reach a common conclusion as a society.
Honorable Pemka, how did watching the report make you feel? It's not often you get Ghana featuring on CNN.
Well, I have a problem with the report itself. And as we progress, I will seek to address that. It looks like the reporter set out to achieve a certain aim. And in doing so, he tailored his report along a certain line to be able to achieve that aim that he set out for himself. He tried to portray the state as an intolerant and, I mean, I'm shying away from saying that a group of very wicked people.
Homophobic.
I'm just struggling to get the appropriate adjectives, but I'll get them as we progress.
Right.
The point is that I am unhappy with the report and in its entirety. And as we progress, as I said, we'll do a critique of it.
Yeah. Because
the report did not situate whatever he was doing also within a certain context.
Okay, I'll come back to you on that. But let's bring in Adam Senanu, who is with the group Advocates for Christ. They had a press briefing yesterday where they presented a young gentleman who are deemed to have reformed from being a homosexual. But first, my question to you, Mr. Senanu, how did you feel watching that CNN report? I believe you may have seen the longer version, but this is the abridged one.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I'm not quite sure I sat through the entire thing, but CNN has a reputation, not too surprising, and I wouldn't expect them to do anything different from what happened. And they're entitled to promote what they want to and to take a position. We are also entitled to have a position on the matter. So I'm not too really bothered. I think what matters is what we as a society believe should be in the best interest of this nation.
Now, what was the objective of presenting the young man yesterday as somebody who had reformed from being a homosexual?
Well, let me first take a step back. Yesterday, we presented our science paper. We had a science memo which covered the medical, the genetic, and the psychological arguments why this bill is crucial. And so we set out to indicate that there is no gauging, and therefore, from that context, there's nothing unique about the homosexual group, such that we should be saying that.
It's not loud enough.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, go ahead, Adam.
Okay. So first, we wanted to set out the scientific arguments. We've had probably about 10 different professionals, professors and doctors, pulling together on over 60 references on the subject matter to first establish that, look, from the sciences, this is a no-starter. It is something that is a choice. And the Human Genome Project, which covered 500 million citizens of the globe, establishes that there's no gauging and that 75% of what makes us decide on a sexual orientation depends on the environment and the culture within which we find ourselves, 75%. To that extent, these are choices. And if they are choices, we cannot talk about fundamental human rights in that context. Now, in that, talking about that, we also wanted to demonstrate that there are people who have recognized that these are choices, have allowed themselves to be held, and they have made a change and a transition. And so Aaron's testimony, so to speak, was to buttress the fact that there is hope. Because for us, we think that these are our brothers and sisters, whatever we can do to ensure that they are assisted ought to be done. And I think the bill actually protects community, because having raised this issue in January that they were going to open an office and so on and so forth, it then stirred up the emotions of Ghanaians. And if we didn't put in place something that would support and protect them, that would be dangerous. So that's the context.
Now, one of the questions I want to ask is about the science. Isn't it just the reality that science is never exhaustive? And so saying categorically and in absolute terms that there is no gay gene may not be entirely accurate. And we do know that sometimes there are hormonal imbalances that make an individual tilt in the opposite direction. We've seen individuals who exhibit tendencies that demonstrate that they are not of the gender that they have signed on to or that had been ascribed to them. So isn't it too quick to just ascribe absolutism to say there is no gay gene, especially when Aaron said as young as 9 years old, he had homosexual urges. He was never attracted to women or girls. He was always attracted to boys.
Well, thank you. And I think you should have been part of the session yesterday. So I'm going to have to break it down for you. In the sciences, we like to be precise. So what we do is you run a test, you get a result, you do that test repeated times to see whether you get the same result, so that you can now say that if you apply this amount of pressure, your car will stop. All the gadgets you use, the planes, the cars, what you have, is the precision of science that allows us to draw conclusions. Now, in the issue of the male-female versus intersex, the issue is that we do not define male and female simply by the physical observation of genitalia. What ultimately defines male and female is the chromosomal composition, which means the type and the number of chromosomes, and sometimes the hormonal levels. So in a situation where you see two organs, say a male, female, what you do is you run a genetic analysis to find out, is it XY? Do we have more XY or more XX or XXX? And what are the hormonal levels? The assessment then arrives at a conclusion to say that in terms of XY, we have more XY, so this is a male, or you have more XX, so it's a female, or you have a hormonal level that indicates that this is male or female. So the sciences have protocols that are applied to arrive at the final conclusion of the matter. And I'm trying to say that you've got to sit at the feet of scientists to understand. We have no doubt in our minds that this issue was resolved hundreds of years ago and nothing has changed. So the fact that some people, from a physical observation, you see certain things. So you've seen a male organ, say female, so you're thinking, oh, there's confusion here. That's not the case for the sciences. For the sciences, the question is the chromosomes and the hormonal levels. So it's like you've picked a car, and there are several criteria you must look at to decide whether it's a saloon car or it's a 4x4. You don't just use one criteria. There are a number of criteria that come together to draw the final conclusion. So if we run the genetic analysis, usually, if you find that the XY is more, and yet you are showing some XX, it will mean that you need that's a case to be managed. So you have other doctors who come on board, those who deal with endocrinology, etc., to look at what kind of drugs and whatnot to manage the hormonal levels and so on and so forth, so that it is clear this is. But in terms of the science, once they run the genetic analysis, they will draw a firm conclusion, which has always been the case, except for the fact where you don't have the equipment to run those tests.
All right. Let me come to Mr. Akoto-Ampao there. So initially I was thinking of the legal, the religious. Now there's the scientific, argument that comes through. What is the way to look at it? Is it about science? Is it about religion? Or can all the three come together, including the law?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I want to make the point here that this debate is not about religious beliefs. Secondly, this debate is not about numbers. It's not lining up how many people support gay. 30 million. How many people are against gay? 2 million or whatever, or the other way around. That is not the issue. The issue, the fundamental issue, has to do with our constitution and rights. That's the basic issue that we have to address. And it is a bit gratifying that just recently the majority leader in Parliament said that the matter will not be discussed on the basis of religious beliefs. I think that's a major step forward if that is how Parliament is going to address this matter. It's a constitutional matter, impinging on rights and the public interest. Now, the science. First of all, let me make the point that the bill itself recognizes the intersex category, which suggests that the person is not necessarily born at birth with an assigned sex, male or female. The second point I want to make is that, as our colleague had just said, it depends on the chromosomes. And it is not the case that you have nature in its diversity would necessarily have either the chromosomes that define you clearly as a man or chromosomes that define you clearly as a woman. And therefore, there are situations where the sex in terms of male and female cannot be determined. And it is, he makes the point that you may have a little more of the male or a little more of the female and so on. And that can be addressed through medical management and so on. Now, our point here is that, one, you are dealing with the autonomy of the individual. So, and of course, the parents and so on. So you cannot determine or dictate for them whether they should access such medical conditions. My second point here is that it is not the case that this thing has been determined by science hundreds of years ago. And in any event, scientific history shows very clearly that if you are addressing a natural phenomenon based on a particular theory, you tend to have the same results until a new theory emerges. That's the process of scientific development. So today, scientists would think that this is the scientific answer to the problem because they are working within a particular scientific paradigm. It takes somebody working outside that paradigm to develop a new paradigm which is even more effective and creates the basis for new knowledge. So the question of science is not determined absolutely as is being suggested. And the point here is that as the bill itself recognizes, there are people who are asexual. They don't have any feelings for male or female and so on. What has the state got to do with that? Is it the state's business to criminalize such a person? And if a person is intersex, is it the state's business to criminalize that? And that the fact that the bill goes to that extent of criminalizing somebody who is an intersex or criminalizing somebody who is asexual, a meaningless, project, shows the extremism of the mind frame that produced that bill.
All right. Let me take a final comments from Mr. Senanu, because he'll have to leave us in some minutes. So what has the state got to do with sexuality? I mean, I dare say it's not for nothing that adultery is not a crime. It's a basis for divorce, but it's not a crime. And even in our criminal code, those who go beyond bounds and engage in sexual assault, sodomy, defilement, rape, there are punishments prescribed for them. So really, why criminalize LGBTQ? Why can't we just coexist in peace? They should be allowed to work. They should live their lives. They shouldn't be identified and targeted. And it may seem that that's what this bill does.
Okay, so thank you, Jifa. And I need to first, as a scientist, disagree with my senior. I mean, he's a lawyer. I am first and foremost a scientist before a governance practitioner. And I want to reiterate that there is an absolute position on the sciences on the issue of male and female. We don't have any different fluidity or progressive interpretations like they may have in law. It is XY or it's XX.
No.
It's as simple as that, and nothing has changed. Indeed, when there have been new theories, the new theories have been tested. For example, there was a gentleman known as Levy who self-identified as a homosexual. And in work that he did with animals, had said he had found some biomarkers that indicated a potential genetic foundation for homosexuality. What was done was that other researchers or professionals tested the theory. And what you do is you try and replicate what he has done and see whether you arrive at the same conclusions. Unfortunately, all the new theories and frameworks that have come up, whenever scientists have tested or tried to replicate this, they have been found wanting. None of the repeated tests have found that these theories actually have a foundation. So we have a very systematic way of saying that there's a new theory, it is fundamentally sound, and we can use it to draw conclusions. So let's not hurriedly allow Mr. Akoto-Ampao to sweep under the carpet the sciences. I take great exception to that as a scientist. And I think they need to sit with a multidisciplinary team to draw the kind of conclusions they want to draw. This is what was not done in the West, and we see the kind of chaos they are descending into. Now, let me come to the issue of this.
Not to interrupt you, Edem, before you continue on your thought, but isn't this the same view that in the past they said the world was flat, and years later we've changed that to the world being round, and Galileo was asked to recant, you know, those views. That position has been changed, apologies have been rendered. So that is why we cannot consider things in absolute terms.
No, Jifa, if you want to go down that road, you need to proffer specific evidence why we should think in the contrary. Let's not just make a kind of a speculative discussion, because we are professionals here. We're engaging around a subject matter that is very emotive and important to Ghanaians. So let's not do flat Earth versus round Earth. If you, Jifa, now have, or Mr. Akoto-Ampao, or anyone for that matter who's a proponent of this matter, have specific information, evidence that you can adduce that suggests that there is a new theory that we need to test as scientists and draw a conclusion, we'll do that. But we are clear that whilst we have a human rights lobby who have been pushing sexual orientation as a right, we say it's a practice because there's nothing that allows you to say it's a unique situation for it to be a fundamental basic right. Otherwise, we go down a slippery slope of everybody who has other preferences beginning to say, it's my right to bed wet, it's my right to smoke marijuana, and so on and so forth. Now, let me come to the second issue that you raised about the state. I think that we confuse issues. We try and make it a matter of the state versus everyone, when we all know, and I have taught public policy, I've trained 20 plus of the top NGOs, CSOs on what makes good public policy. Good policy and law emanates from the people. The issue we should be asking ourselves is, on this matter of homosexual activity, what is the ideal, the aspiration, and the thinking of the people of Ghana? Because to the extent that in the UK or US, you have a law that says that we accept homosexual habits and practices, but we don't accept polygamy. But in Ghana, you do. You must understand that there's a social ethos that defines what is law, good law. Legitimate law is to the extent of the ownership of the people. So let's ask ourselves today, what do the majority of Ghanaians feel is in the best interest? And ultimately, if we need to do a differentiation between, let's understand what the minority groups are and how do we take them on board, that's an excellent way forward. And I believe that Ghanaians are discerning. I've heard some people talk about the sentencing policy having to be relooked at, etc. I think we ought to do things like that. But let's not run away from the fact that there's a CDD report that indicates that 93% of Ghanaians have said that this issue of LGBTQIA++ activities is not one that we're aligned with. And the last time we attempted something like that with the toll levy law, Ghanaians said you cannot implement this. It's certain. So don't forget that it is what the people say ultimately that matters. It's not a matter of let's just look at it from the perspective of what the state. It's not just a state. We, Article 1.1 or Article 35.1, sovereignty lies in the people. We repose authority in the government for a period. They are our agents. It is what we believe is in the best interest of Ghanaians. That is what should carry the day. And in this instance, we will compel others who want to talk about this to understand it in the context of the best interest of the public. By the way, the medical evidence also shows that there is so much complications in relation to the homosexual community, apart from the fact that many of them are also heterosexual. So if they are getting HIV/AIDS and the prevalence is high, we have 18.1% of our homosexuals in Ghana already HIV/AIDS positive. And they also have heterosexual partners. So that's the benefit they give us. There's also the issue of the oral and throat cancers, the anal cancers. There's a lower life expectancy of about 20 to 25 years. And all of this comes as a health cost to the health services of the country. So there are economic issues that must also be considered when we talk about this.
Okay, just a quick one. You mentioned the role of the state and the like, but in our constitution, everyone is deserving of equal consideration, respect, and dignity. The fact that 93% of Ghanaians agree on something doesn't mean that the other 7%'s views should be subservient. There must be protection of minorities, because it wasn't too long ago.
That's exactly what I said.
No. You are saying you are saying that the majority carries the day. We should accept it and move on. But how do you protect? How do you protect minorities? Because today it's LGBTQ. Tomorrow it's Muslims. Tomorrow it may be an ever woman like me. Tomorrow it may be a minority religious faith. Where does it end?
So, Jifa, I think you missed that part of my argument. I first established that in a democracy, what the majority say is important. And then I went on to say that, however, it's important to reflect what the minorities also think about the matter, an engagement around the table to understand their concerns and take them on board in terms of the sentencing policy, in terms of the architecture is also crucial. And so I said the way forward would be talking also about what are the concerns of all other parties and taking them on board. But let's not forget that in a democracy, the majority view of what the public interest issues are is what is going to carry. Critical thing is that those who lead this process must ensure that the minority concerns have been taken on board. And that's why this is a healthy conversation. And I think that is something that should distill what is key to be factored into the process.
A final point before I let you go. Key to this whole conversation is empathy. Key to this whole conversation is empathy. And the bill, in one hand, asks people to report known homosexuals or those who engage, that is if it's passed into law. It asks parents to put out their children. It asks a brother or a sister to out their family member. There is no haven, no shelter for LGBTQ people. If there is no compassion, no empathy, then it doesn't consider the rights of these minority groups at all.
Okay, so let me start by saying that, as I've said earlier, I mean, the issue about whether this is a fundamental human right is one we dispute. And it's why I said there's no genetic basis for this. It's a practice, and we need to help them. Now, from our quarters, we have done a lot to try and ensure. In fact, as it is, we are already supporting people who are under those conditions to see how they can improve their economic status and come out of it. And that's why you had an Aaron sharing his experience yesterday. I don't know when you say there's no compassion, no empathy. That's a very sweeping statement. Because
but if you ask a parent to...
Can I learn?
Yes, but if you ask parents... but if you ask parents and family members to report their people, then where is the empathy there?
No, it's not about parents having to report. I mean, that then begins to have a misunderstanding of the law. Criminal activity, whether it is stealing, and don't forget Section 104 of our Criminal Code 1960 is still on the books. And so citizens, by virtue of their obligations under Article 41, are required, when you see such things, to report them. That's just a standard thing. Now, if we are saying that we want to create a variation because we anticipate that it may be difficult because of some circumstances, that potentially is a discussion to be held. But don't say that there's no empathy because the standard law says that when you see a crime, report it. And that's what you are reflecting. So let's not confuse the issues in the context. I think that if there are recommendations to be made because we envisage some challenges, let's make those recommendations. And I think that for all of us who see these as our brothers and sisters, we will be working to ensure that we can comfortably support them and assist them to make sure that moving ahead, they are even much better off than they were in the past.
How do you know a person like...
I have to run away.
Yes, just a final one. How do you know...
They were expecting me 7 minutes ago.
How do you know that somebody like Aaron will not return to his homosexual ways? How do you know?
I'm not quite sure why that is a question for me to answer. I mean, I can't tell, and I don't know I don't know what value I'm supposed to bring to that question. Is there a specific reason you're asking that question?
Well, we can't be sure if really he says he's no more a homosexual and maybe he doesn't keep up. How about that?
Well, I'm not quite sure what value it brings to the discussion. What it is that public policy emanates from a social context. And at the moment, this is where we find ourselves. And it's not just Ghana. Africa has a minimum of 80% on average of Africans say they don't accept this practice. In West Africa, Senegal has 98% of the population, Liberia 95% of the population. So it's nothing new. It is our context from where we have come. If at a certain point in the future of the history of this country, say 50 years from now, we have a different position, that is what it will be. But from a democratic perspective, I mean, all of us are Democrats. We need to provide a space for dissenting voices to be heard, for their concerns to be taken on board, to embrace them as brothers and sisters. And I think that is what we should focus on at this stage.
Many thanks to you. Edem Senanu is with the Advocates for Christ there, bringing us those perspectives. But before we come back fully to the studios, let's hear from the Church of Pentecost. This week, they mobilized not just the pastors, but various groups within the church to present their memoranda to Parliament. Apostle Nyameche heads the Church of Pentecost.
The Church of Pentecost is over 3.1 million, about 10.38% of the Ghanaian population. And we have brought in 15,000 signatories. I believe that this is significant enough. If they give us time, we can even bring 2 million. Yeah, just to make the statement that this bill, we support it 100%. And so we are praying for the parliamentarians to make good arguments. They should know that there's a creation. This is a sovereign state, but the whole world is a sovereign state with a ruler. And then the one who created us reserves the right to tell us how to behave. If we leave the right to behavior in the hands of the creation, then soon every lifestyle will be shielded by law till we have some anarchy state, lawlessness in this nation. Now, if you want to have sex with a beast, they say it's okay. If I want to have sex with a pig, it's okay. If I want to marry my daughter, it's okay. If I want to have sex with a tree, it's okay. I mean, so where are we going? So the issue is not about rights. The issue is about morality. What is right and what is wrong. Having said that, we don't hate LGBTQ people, not at all. And we are not saying that they are not human, but we hate their deeds because it is evil. What this LGBTQ seeks to do is to extinct the human population. Soon there will be no multiplication because people are not marrying the opposite sex. Then who do you want to produce a child for you to come and adopt? If your lifestyle does not produce human beings, when God says we should be fruitful and multiply, human beings are needed on this earth to manage the earth. Now, when we extinct them, then we are extincting the world. Yeah, we get to the street, and our numbers come out, and you see us, and you can still pass something against this bill. Then you have done well. But we are going to cause our people to come on the street, and we are going to warn any government that if you vote against this bill, we will vote you out. And that is it. There's no room for neutrality. No, it's not political. It is not political. Ghana is not, what I'm saying is not political. It's about the future of the nation. Anyone who wants to destroy this nation, we will not allow you to rule us. That is it.
Well, I guess the battle lines are drawn there. Let's turn now to Honorable Kwemka. So politicians, you are in the hot seat. They've asked MPs to declare their stance. They want an open vote to see who is voting for this bill or against. If the government doesn't pass it, they will vote the government out. Is this political blackmail?
Well, you may give it a name, but I have an opinion on the matter. See, Jifa, I have, as I told you earlier, one of the persons that motivated me to read law has been Mr. Akutu Ampao, growing up. But I disagree with him on this one. You see, law operates within a certain framework, and society for that matter. Society shapes law. Otherwise, unbridled application of law and rights without society will lead to absurdity. I heard a brother, he gave a perspective to science. He did too. My position is that it is not the genetic make of a person that is being criminalized, but the conduct. It is the conduct that is being sought to be criminalized, but not the genetic make of the persons. You see, if you look at our law, Jifa, if you read Article 11 and Article 39 of our Constitution, 11 tells us that among the sources of law, we have customary law. 39, which is under the directive principles of state policy, is talking about the need for the state to take steps to absorb and practice and promote cultural practices to the extent that they are not unconstitutional. Now, the moral fiber of our society cannot be isolated from the rights that we enjoy. If we do isolate them, then we will run to a very difficult situation where we will not be able to, as a people, differentiate one from the other. I say this because what is a law if it is not meant for the good of man? Laws are generally meant to regulate mankind's behavior and attitudes. If you make a choice to be a gay, and we say that we should respect that right of yours. Somebody decides that his choice as a woman is that he wants to have sex with his son. That's the person's right. Or the man says, my choice is that I want to be sleeping with my daughter. So that is my right. Allow me. Somebody says, my right is that I want to ensure that my entire family changes their genetic make to a certain sex. It's their right. Let's allow them. Where are we going? You see, look at our cultural dynamics. Situate this within the context of our culture here. And look at the context of LGBTQI, whatever you call it, in the West. And make a comparison of the two. But the two societies, I want to beg to state this, are different from each other. You see,
but Honorable Kpemka,
we are bold enough.
You're saying it as if we've never
I'm coming there.
No, just a quick one, because it relates to what you are saying. You're saying it as if we've never had homosexuals in the Ghanaian or African society. And research has documented over centuries that we have had them with us. They've coexisted. They've lived in peace. They've not been targeted. They've not even been specifically identified by the law. So why do we want to do that now and use culture as the conduit or religion as the conduit?
Jifa, I heard you say here clearly that you are an Ewe woman. Which part of Ewe land will people see homosexuals practicing it in the community and not banish them? Where? I have a lot of Ewe friends. I come from the north. Where do we have homosexuals practicing this act and then the chiefs and people look on and coexist with them? All that you are saying, those people who have practiced it, even if it is over 2,000 years, they do it under the cover of dark. They don't profess it publicly. The danger we are now faced with is that we want to say that it is their right. They should come out, form associations and groups, because there's a constitution that says freedom of association. They should form those groups, exercise their rights. We should recognize it. We shouldn't criminalize it. Yes. As soon as we get to that stage where we don't have any law to regulate it, and we say they should enjoy their rights, and they peak, P-E-A-K, they peak, we can have a situation in our society where there will be total crisis and chaos.
Oh, Honorable Kpemka, the recent population and housing census indicated that Ghana's population growth grew by 6 million and more over 10 years. I don't think we have a risk of extinction, do we?
My goodness. This advocacy we have now, have we had that in the past? No, because there was nothing of this sort, the level of pushing they are making to the extent of making efforts to open an office. We should go and allow every individual to open offices and advocate their rights because it's within their rights. I have told you.
Well, I'm not advocating that they should advocate for themselves. But
I have told you that our constitution says that we should recognize customary laws and practices. I am saying there is no customary practice or law in Ghana that allows for homosexuality to be practiced. There is no society in Ghana, not one,
you didn't ask,
that recognizes and protects homosexuality. There is none.
Okay, you didn't answer my earlier question about the politicians. The reverends have thrown a challenge to the politicians. You're one. It's true, you're not in parliament, but
the threat for me is over the bar. You don't blackmail
or hold the country
to lobby to make your opinion clear that let my side of the debate, be the victor, or suffer political consequences, that's blackmail. That's not what we're saying. For me, I don't support LGBTQ. I don't support it. Today, I don't. Tomorrow, I will not. Because it does not fit into the cultural hegemony within which I grew up. And I'm not ready to adapt to it because it is alien to us. That is the point. Look, you see, if we want to talk about rights, and we talk about rights to be enjoyed without limitations, we will run into a certain difficulty that we cannot extricate ourselves from. Because, you see, I have already stated that society grows with history at the back of its mind. Look, I am running away from bringing in religion because my learned senior will categorically tell you that, look, if you are arguing that you are a Christian and Ghana is a secular state, then what are you talking about? Those who do not believe in religion at all. Are you excluding them? And that would be a good point to make. But I am looking at generally our norms and values. Are our norms and values accommodating these practices or tolerating these practices? Or these practices are alien to us? If they are alien to us, how are we going to have them to influence our culture without destroying the very basic fiber and cultural nuances that hold us together as a people?
Criminalizing LGBTQ, and this is in reference to the memorandums that have been submitted the entire week, either for or against the promotion of proper human sexual rights and Ghanaian Family Values Bill 2021. Yes, Mr. Koto-Ampao, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, a lot has been said, both by my good friend and colleague Joseph Penka and Adam Senano. Now, I want to emphasize the point that democracy is not the same as majoritarianism. Yes, democracy involves the majority rule or majority rule, but it also very critically involves protection of the minority. So whilst the majority generally will have their say, they cannot wipe away the existence of the minority. And that is why the Constitution carves out a certain space of individual rights that nobody, whether you are in the majority or in the minority, can invade. That is, so the majority cannot say that because we are the majority, there should be no freedom of speech. Or because we are the majority, it is only this religion that must be practiced in Ghana. And because of that, the Constitution in Article 21(1), as you very well know, protects the right to freedom of expression and speech. And it's only subject not to the majority opinion, but subject to the public interest and the rights and freedoms of other individuals. That is the thing. So I think it is quite misconceived for people to think that this issue we are debating has to do with numbers, that whether the overwhelming majority of Ghanaians do not like homosexualism. That is fine. It may be their case, and because they have the majority, and because they also have churches and mosques and other religious organizations that do not believe or that are against homosexuals, they can preach that view as education, religious education, among their majority congregations, so that they may not be infected by LGBTQ so-called propaganda or advocacy. Now, I think it is quite significant that notwithstanding all the churches and mosques we have across the country who are doing 24-hour a day, sometimes services, they see that there's this problem. Is it because they have failed in their education of their flock? Is it because they have failed in inculcating the values that their beliefs promote, that they now want to go to the state to stamp it down? And that they now want to go to the state to stamp down a small group that are advocating for their rights? I think that it is clearly, in my view, an admission of their failure.
But Mr. Kotampa, of all the references to rights, there's no reference to sexual rights in the Constitution,
yes,
for instance.
Yes.
International charters, yes. But to the extent that sexual rights are not mentioned, it presupposes that that is not what is considered a right. That's why the anti-LGBTQ lobby say that it is a lifestyle choice they have made.
Well, let me deal with that in a number of ways. The first point that I want to make is that the Constitution protects every individual, whether you are LGBT or not. And if you are a human being, the Constitution says that your humanity should not be it's invaluable. You cannot demonize the person's humanity. Yes, it's very clear on that. So even if you say that the Constitution does not mention sex, the Constitution in Article 33(4) states very clearly that the fundamental rights specifically mentioned in the Constitution do not exhaust the whole space of fundamental rights that are considered rights in a free and democratic society. So the Constitution itself recognizes that it is simply not the case that it is only the rights mentioned in the Constitution that are fundamental rights. The second aspect of that argument is that, you see, it is being said that it is law comes from the people, law is informed by the social context, and law is informed by cultural values. That is true to only an extent under our Constitution. Why do I say so? When you go to Article 26(1), it reads, every person is entitled to enjoy, practice, profess, maintain, and promote any culture, language, tradition, or religion, subject to the provisions of the Constitution. So again, the Constitution subjects culture, cultural values, and so on to the to the provisions of the Constitution. So you can't say that because A, B, C, D are part of our values, and we are different from Britain, which is true, or the US, therefore we are free under our Constitution to do what we want. The Constitution says that all these values are subject to the provisions of the Constitution. So you need to check whether the values that our people have about LGBTQ, which makes them hate them, and which leads to the lobby to have their lifestyle, if you wish, or their identity criminalized, can be defended under the Constitution. I think that it is very clear that it cannot be defended under the Constitution.
But to be fair to the Church of Pentecost, when I read their memoranda, they did make some recommendations because they have concerns about some clauses that have the capacity to overstep bounds. So for instance, clause 5 in the proposed bill, where people are asked to report gay people, they feel that this will create an atmosphere of hysteria, an aspect which, you know, could create crisis in the country. So they want that looked at. The clause that for those who may advocate for LGBTQ, the punishment of a proposed 5 to 10 years will stifle debates and views, and so for that needs to be looked at in terms of the punitive measure. They feel, however, there's the potential for propaganda, where you would have imagery that is consistently putting out information that could then impact impressionable young minds like children. And so there must be something that deals with that. They also refer to considerations about criminalizing those who fund LGBTQ people, and they want at least those aspects in the bill to be revised.
Well, I from where I sit, this bill cannot be revised in such a way as to be acceptable within the framework of the principles of our Constitution.
Why?
Why? Because the bill effectively violates almost every right guaranteed under the Constitution. It violates the right to freedom of association. It violates the right to equality before the law. It violates the right to protection as a minority. It violates the right of freedom to organize, your right to organize. It violates your right to privacy. It violates all those rights under the Constitution. And therefore, it is so endemic with its constitutional violations that it cannot be amended. It cannot be revised. And it cannot be revised because of the framework of mind that produced this thing. That framework takes the view that if you are homosexual, you are inhuman. And, you know, it's a taboo also. And they quote from the National House of Chiefs that homosexuality is a taboo and inhuman in our custom and values. But that may well be true. The issue is that our Constitution says that these values and customary practices and beliefs are subject to the protections given to individuals and minorities and majorities under the Constitution. So you can't use culture or cultural values as a basis for violating the rights guaranteed for all of us under the Constitution. This law criminalizes association by homosexuals. It criminalizes their right to demonstrate. It criminalizes their right to speak about who they are through any medium. It criminalizes
it criminalizes anyone who also tries to speak and support
them.
Those who may want to give them compassion by housing them.
It virtually suggests that they should not be housed. That is what the law is saying. That you can't, unless they have their own houses, even a landlord cannot house them if he knows that they are homosexual and so on. So what are you trying to do? You are effectively driving them out of the society, which is consistent with what Adam said earlier on, that this thing, they can use social therapy,
conversion
therapy to change them, and those who don't want to change, since it's a lifestyle, then they must face the law. It is targeting a certain very tiny minority in our society, and establishing rules that make their life as social beings a nightmare, a living nightmare. And it needs to be insisted that it is a fallacy to say that you are trying to protect children against, for instance, being defiled by homosexuals, you know. Because if it's a matter of defilement, it should apply whether you are heterosexual or homosexual. And if we think that the law doesn't make enough provision there, it is very easy to, you know, amend those portions of the criminal code which deal with defilement to protect children, to make it very explicit that whether you are heterosexual or homosexual and you defile a child, it is an offense. Now, why is it the case that the law seems to suggest that the tendency among homosexuals to defile children, that is very high? Because the law seems to equate pedophilia with homosexuality, when the evidence that is available to us suggests that most of the defilements that we have are heterosexual. That is a man defiling a child, a girl, or a woman defiling a child boy. And yet, the law makes it look like the biggest danger to the protection of children is from the homosexuals. So I don't think that, given the nature of the violations and the framework of the bill as it stands now, it can be meaningfully amended. If anything at all, the bill has to be set aside, and then they can come up with something new. And let me end by making the point that at least we are not making a case for the law to legalize marriage among homosexuals. So it's a red herring. It's a total red herring in this situation. And it cannot be used to make a case for this bill. And finally, let me say that it is extremely speculative and scaremongering to suggest that without this law, in the near or distant future, you know, the human species would disappear because there would be no reproduction of life. I think it is just sheer scaremongering, because we all know that it doesn't happen. We all know that in other countries they are not experiencing this problem because homosexuals are recognized and accepted as, you know, citizens with rights in those countries, you know.
All right. Honorable Pemka. That's a deep breath.
Eva, I have listened carefully once again to my learned senior, but I keep repeating myself and shouting at the top of the roof that, yes, as he's indicated, he did make a concession that those rights are enjoyed within a certain context in society, fit into a certain societal norm that we have created for ourselves over a period. Right. In Ghana, as we speak, he spoke about majoritarian dictatorship, where we want to say that because the overwhelming majority of Ghanaians are against homosexuality, it ought to go, and that we are not looking at the minority rights.
A law has to be passed.
Yes, a law has to be passed, and we are not looking at minority rights and etc. You see, why are laws made? Over a period, we should have had maybe just the constitution. We wouldn't even make any legislation anymore. But why are we making laws every day? Statutes LIs, CIs, executive instruments. Why? Laws are made to respond to specific situations in life. When you have a lacuna created over time as a result of practice, then you want to make a law to fill in that lacuna.
But the lacuna you may be referring to, isn't that also just an excuse? So some people opened a center to house or to provide a safe haven for LGBTQ people. The Honorable Sam George himself says the reason he's pushed it is as a result of that one event. So using the opening of a center because people are associating to create a bill against them seems like a bit stretching the lacuna.
No, the point is that society says that at this point in time, this conduct or act is abhorrent. It is against good conscience. It is unacceptable. It touches the very existence of our people, the core of our people. It touches society at the heart. So at this particular moment, we do not like it. Therefore, we are criminalizing it. So we are criminalizing it, and as you indicated, there was a reason why they put even in their bill the provision that says that those who fund it ought to suffer some penalties. When you go and then you imprison a terrorist or you attack a terrorist and fail to attack the funding source, terrorism will continue forever. I think that was the purpose for it, but it's far-reaching. So you have to look at other ways of ensuring that you balance it in a manner as to allow society to move on.
But what about the real risk of people attacking people? Because just we are learning yesterday or so.
If you do attack, the law will take its course.
How do we know? We've seen mob injustice. They've not arrested anyone.
If you go and attack somebody, assault has not gone off our law books. If the person is even committing an offense in your presence, unless the person engages in a violent conduct that you can reply with equal violence in order to suppress the situation. If the person is engaged in unlawful conduct, your duty as a citizen, you can effect citizen arrest and hand over the person, please. But lynching and beatings and those things are not part of our law and must not be tolerated. But I'm saying that if the law is passed by Parliament and it becomes unlawful to engage in LGBTQ+, and you engage in it, you will be arrested, processed, and prosecuted. And if found guilty, you'll be punished. Those are processes, just like armed robbers are arrested every day. Thieves are arrested every day. If you cause harm, you are arrested. So the same processes will be followed for us to arrive at those kind of things that we desire. Okay. But
just you need to wrap up, then I'll give Mr. Kotampo the final word.
What I would therefore say is that, for me, Parliament should scrutinize the law, fine-tune it well to meet existing exigencies, so that we will make the law to fit in all facets of our Constitution. But remember that nothing prevents anybody, after the law is passed, from invoking the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court to make a declaration that to the extent that that law sins against a provision of the Constitution, the Supreme Court should declare it unconstitutional. Nothing prevents anybody. Anybody can try that challenge and go through that route. And if the Supreme Court makes a definite pronouncement on this matter, it will serve as a guide.
All right. Mr. Kotampo, final words from you, please.
I think that it is totally out of place to equate terrorism or stealing or robbery or obviously acts that directly harm the public interest or the rights of other individuals, to equate those conducts that are criminalized to the activity of two consenting adults, their relationship as human beings. So I don't think that that comparison is appropriate. Again, I think it is, if you read the bill, it criminalizes every aspect of the lives of homosexuals. And then at the end, it gives some hypocritical protection. Because even if you look at the punishment regime, the maximum punishment that a person who attacks a homosexual will get is 1 year. And you say you are protecting them when you everything in the bill is saying that these people are an abomination, they are inhuman, and so on. When you are actually, inciting the population against them, and then you have this token protection against mob action and lynching. It is not meant to be taken seriously.
Okay. Unfortunately, that's where time will allow us. Thank you very much to Mr. Akoto Ampao, senior lawyer, joining us this morning. Many thanks to the Honorable Kpemka, former Deputy Attorney General and former Member of Parliament. Thanks to Edem Senanu as well, Advocates for Christ, who joined us. Unfortunately, we couldn't reach Reverend Professor Frimpong Manso, but this topic is not going anywhere anytime soon, and certainly we'll be back with it. You've been watching Key Points live from TV3 and 3FM 92.7. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for your messages as well. Join us again next week for another interesting edition. Up next is Warm Up Plus. Thank you.